Namaste, good evening. Welcome to another interesting episode of Turiya Talks. We have with us an individual institution. We'll talk about all these. First of all, I would like to welcome Rita ma'am, or I call it Rita Didi, to Turiya Talks.
Thank you, Sandhya. Thank you so much. We've known each other a long time, and I love the way you have grown and progressed in this particular field.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, to talk about our guest, Rita ma'am is the founder, CEO of Ritam Communication. Apart from this, ma'am is a practicing corporate communications expert from last more than what, 45, 50 years. She's an author, as well as ma'am is the board of director of few Indian companies. Today, we'll talk about 4 P's of corporate communications or public relations. You have heard 7 P's of marketing, but let's talk about penning, preening, preaching, and practice with none other than but Miss Rita Bhimani. Ma'am, welcome to Turiya Talks once again.
Thank you so much. Okay, shoot.
Right. Right. Ma'am, we all say that business opportunities are like buses. There's always one another coming. But in terms of communication, I think we don't get the second chance. So I would like to know your point of view on this.
I think that's a very good analogy that you have drawn, Sandhya, about a bus and business opportunities. Because if you miss the bus, as far as creating an impression, and this is where one of the P's comes in, which is what I call the perfection or the preen quotient. Unless you can make that preen, that impression the first time, you'll never get a second chance. And this holds particularly true for when you're dealing with clients, when you're talking to a large audience, when you're dealing with students, when you're competing with another company. All of it is that first push, that getting on to the bus, it's so to say. That is so important. And then the rest should be a smooth journey. It's got to have its ups and downs, but there you are.
Right. Ma'am, what is the role of communications experts in the business world? I don't know whether to say post-COVID or pre-COVID, but I think during the current times, I'll ask where it's hybrid model. So how do they, what is their role, what they should do?
You know what I really think, Sandhya, is that COVID has given us a different chance. Once again, we're talking about chances. Once again, we're talking about riding that bus. And I think we ought to be riding the bus of opportunity of these hybrid times when we can communicate both online and offline, because I think it's a greater challenge in these days. You see, for years and for decades, we've been doing offline communication. We've been doing person to person. It's still person to person, by the way, and it probably gets better when you're on the screen with other people. It's just as good. What I'm finding is this whole challenge of getting more time to ourselves, more time to introspect, and to be able to plan better and to strategize better about our approaches to communication during these pandemic times. I think it has given us this opportunity to do what we wanted to do. We've probably been over busy and running around. We've actually gained on travel time. We've not had to move so much. You, particularly in your business, have not had to jump around so much. So whatever jumping around you've done is internally and strategizing internally, and then getting across that message ultimately. This holds particularly true of crisis communication because we're facing a lot of crises in our time. And this is something that I feel that you can tackle much more effectively on social media. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to say that digitally, there's a lot of things you can accomplish which you may not have done earlier.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, the public is the only critic whose opinion is worth anything at all, we all say. So, being an institution yourself, what is your opinion, or rather, what is your take? What institutions and companies should do? So, some quick tips, 5, 10 points, which any corporate should look at.
You see, I was just earlier referring to these hybrid times. And I think corporates should see their communication strategies as a meld of both things. They should, on the one hand, stick to the basics. I think it's important nowadays. We tend to run away with this whole idea that we will have eyeballs and we will have this huge reach because of social media. And there is this whole thing of influencer marketing. All that is very usable. Please use influencers. Corporates should use all of them. But I think there has to be that very basic planning and writing and strategizing and communicating in the old fashioned way that must still remain, because people are forgetting all that. Through short messaging service, a lot of things get lost, whereas you have to do a lot of in depth research. It's given us more time because of us being held back by not being able to go out so much. So I think these are the times when we should capitalize on time, on the fact that we have more time at our disposal to be able to go out and communicate better, reach out to more people, reach out to our target audiences in in a more structured way.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, corporate communications professionals, people say they are mix of what? Knowledge of what? Journalism, psychology, lawyering. What is your opinion on this? That is number one. Secondly, few people say that we are trained psychologists. So, how can people communicate with themselves to improve the quality of their lives?
You know, you brought up a very interesting point, because communication is not just writing, not just words. It is the ability to be using psychology and psychiatry, and the ability to be able to get into the other person's shoes and to have that empathy. And you have to have that if you're communicating in different situations and we're communicating with different people. And I think here the role of human resource development groups also come in, because this is where the psychology element also comes in. So you have to understand not only the psychology of an individual, but you have to understand the psychology of a company. Where does it want to place itself? This is where your whole branding strategy should come in. How do you build a brand which is unique? How do you do it and give it a fresh new perspective? That's when you have to use the right psychology to find out what is at the core and the essence of the product that the company is trying to make people buy, or the fact that an institution is also trying to project its image. How is it doing that? That's when you have to look into the heart of that company before you can communicate.
Before we proceed further with this 4 P's, penning, training, preaching, and practice with Miss Rita Bhimani, ma'am, we would like to know about your journey of last, 50 years in the communications vertical.
You know, it's been a wonderful and very interesting journey, because one of the things I'd like to say is that I've actually stuck with this profession for this long. What a lot of youngsters want to do or try to do is jump from one thing to another, and I have uh, uh, no problem at all with that, because I think people ought to be trying new things. But the fact that I could stick with corporate public relations and make it grow and see it grow, that has been my satisfaction. I actually did my master's in journalism from the University of Georgia. Straight after college in Loreto, I went there, got a scholarship, and I went to Georgia. And it opened up a different world to me because remember, their method of teaching is very different from the methodology in India. They make you think, they make you uh, sort of come out of your shyness, they make you want to be more positive. And this is what I did. I felt that mm, in India, we tend to be a little modest, whereas in America, you had to actually uh, be louder about your achievements and actually be able to be more confident and speak more confidently. So when I went there, actually, I got a very good opportunity because the editor of the university newspaper actually asked me to do a column, a weekly column, which was wonderful. And you know, even till this day, that particular editor is still my friend and we still
Okay.
communicate. And I've gone and met up with her when I went to do a series of lectures at my university. So this is also the power of communication. This is also the power of connectivity, which I think I lay a lot of stress on. So then my journey began because I came back to India and I worked with a couple of multinationals. I worked with the Tea Board India, trying to project the image of Indian tea to the rest of the world. Then I worked with a multinational for about 18 years, and I got to know what it was like to work for an engineering company. Because what is at the heart of communication is to find out what that particular company does, what the industry does. You've got to go to their factories. You've got to know exactly how that company is doing vis-a-vis other people in that same industry. So that taught me a lot, and I think I was also able to give them certain strategies to get ahead. But then after a while, I felt that maybe one is sticking too long with one industry. So why don't I start my own? That was a big plunge into the icy waters, unknown totally at that time of what PR consultancy was all about. But let me tell you, I did have very good advice, sound advice from a lot of people whom I had met over the years because we had attended a lot of international PR conferences. And I found a lot of the people there were not just working for a company, they had all set up PR agencies. So I asked them, I said, how do I set up my own? What is the structure? How do I uh, bill my clients? And a whole lot of other things. And they were wonderfully helpful because at that time I was on the board of the International PR Association. So the contacts were very strong. So this is what happened. And with armed with some of this advice, let's say, I could go ahead. When I started, I had no clients. It was just, let's start it. Let's give it a name. I called it Ritam Communications. And within a week of just starting without anything, uh, the clients started coming. People started coming to me. I never had to make a brochure to market myself. Because I think if you've been in the business for this long, people know you, there's a certain
Yeah.
credibility. So I kept a low profile, but the deliverables were high. So let us say it was a range of industries that one went into. And that is what uh, gave me the confidence. And I was able to get into a lot of very interesting situational projects, very, very varied. And that's how this thing progressed. Along the way, I found that people still didn't understand what PR was all about. So I said, let me write my first book. And my publishers actually, they wrote to me, will you write a book on PR? One line. I wrote back one line to say, yes, I'd love to. So that's how the journey started with Rupa Publications. Then that first book came, then a second book, because you had to explain. to corporates, to individuals, to students, to a whole lot of people what this whole profession was all about. And it went out to a large number of students in universities and all over the place, because that's what the penning part is all about. So that and writing a lot of articles and papers and speaking at various forums. So that's how one grew the profession, grew into the profession. And also, I found that at certain stage, you have to also keep learning. You can't be complacent. There came a time when there were certain conferences where they would invite me, and I remember one of the first digital conferences that they said, "Will you come and speak?" And I said, "Certainly not, because I'm a dinosaur." And they said, "No, nothing doing. You have to come and speak. Maybe you speak from the heart. Maybe you speak about back to basics," which is what I did. But then you had to learn what it was all about. So I think learning never stops. So that is what one has done over the years. So that's how it is. The profession um, has grown with me, and I have grown with it. And apart from writing books on PR, I've done the history of the Calcutta School of Music, lots of research, done it. I've done a film on Raja Ram Mohan Roy, again, a very different genre. That also went. I was one of the first news readers on Doordarshan. That was yet another aspect of communication. Radio was yet another aspect. Uh, then a whole lot of celebrity conversations, one on one, with people ranging from Shashi Tharoor and Mahesh Bhatt to authors and directors and sports people. All that was the total communication package. So you've got to keep on being current, being contemporary, and keep on doing new things while still sticking to the knitting.
Absolutely right. Ma'am, can a natural communicator be a communications professional? Will that person he or she has to undergo some kind of course? Because people say that it will come naturally. He can learn while working.
I think you're absolutely right. A natural communicator can just come into the profession and just keep going and learn as they go along, because you face a situation early on in life. So you don't have to really study this subject. I know people do it. There are lots and lots of media courses. I myself have taught media science 3-year degree course for more than 16 years because it was there, because I felt we had to do it. Both my husband and I did it. But at the end of the day, when they would say, "Okay, ma'am, now can we go for a master's for this?" I said, "No, no, no. You will just uh, go and start practicing what you have learned and just go into it. Whichever field is something where you feel you're a natural communicator, to use your very words." So some people could go into photography, other people went into events, um, other people went into journalism, other people went into filmmaking. So there were so many, many fields that opened up to these students. But yes, you've got to be a natural communicator. Yes.
So one has to read a lot, one has to be just updated. People go to universities and they
Yes.
don't
Yes.
read
Yes.
papers. I think that's the tragedy. Few of the people when I come across currently this generation. So you feel bad about the whole of the things.
Yes, it's got to come to you naturally. I remember when a lot of people would apply when my husband was a print journalist and also an electronic media personality. So when people would come to him and they would say, "Now we want to join a course," and he would say, "Certainly not. Are you able to write? Let me give you an assignment. Let me see if you have it in you." And if they were naturals, let us say, natural communicators, I think they came into this profession very easily.
Right, ma'am. Ma'am, would you speak anything about the social media playing an integral role these days among the media channels? Maybe something from your heart, as you said, or maybe you can talk something about the basics.
Well, basics is there. See, you have to have knowledge. You have to know what you're talking about. You've got to keep reading, as you yourself said. Reading, 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 updating yourself, knowing what's going on around you in the political world, in the economic stratosphere. You've got to be knowledgeable about it all, because I think people should come to a communicator to know that you have that credibility, you have the knowledge, and you should be able to um, give them something that they don't know. They might read something, but you should be able to interpret that knowledge that you have. Then the second stage will come when you actually want to go into the social media, and then you want to spread your net far and wide. That's the next stage. But there's no getting away from having that very, very basic knowledge and being able to apply that knowledge at the right time. Definitely. And the other thing I feel is that I think this is also an age of specialization. So if you specialize in a particular field, you will get a lot more opportunities. So, say if somebody has, just take an example, done geography honors in college, that does not stop him or her from actually getting into the communication field, because they already have a knowledge of that particular field. In fact, it can be very, very useful. Or science, if they've been science students, that really actually gives them a solid base of knowledge to be able to get ahead. I know that there are various people who make science subjects quite easy to understand by the way they write about it. There's this one gentleman, I know, G.S. Mudur, whom I read a lot in the papers. And you know that you can turn to him, because he's going to interpret whatever is happening, say, with atomic energy or this or that, or so many other things, or the latest strain of the virus, since that seems to be a big current subject. So, specialization, I think, is also important.
Mm, right. Ma'am, your final take on this penning, preening, preaching, and practice. What do you have to say to people practicing corporate communications?
What I have to say to people practicing corporate communications is that, uh, apart from the actual practice of it, I think you should be writing more. You should be visible as writers. You should be visible as speakers. You can be writing books. So you should be able to do all of it. You should find every opportunity to talk. And now that there's so much on the net, there's so much happening with what you can do, like what we are doing now. I think that way a lot more people can be reached, whether you are doing a TED talk, or whether you're doing any other thing which is online. Lot of online discussions take place, and I think some of them are very, very useful. People can come in and join for a bit. They need not always participate, but they can get that knowledge.
Articulator.
So it is a responsibility for communicators. I think they have to do all of this.
Absolutely right, ma'am. Ma'am, what is your final take on Turiya Talks and Turiya Communications?
Yeah, I like the idea. I think this is very fresh and very different, and you've invited very different kinds of people. I know the last person was an expert in art history, and she was taking us through how you can buy art, and making it easier for people to understand that particular field. So I think it's a fairly wide canvas that you have, and it's interesting that you're doing this, because when you asked me that what should communicators be doing, I think Turiya Talks is one of the things that you're doing, which is reaching out very well.
That is important. We have to spread knowledge, I believe.
Yes.
Any other thing which you would like to say and communicate at
Well, what
Turiya
I'd
Talk?
like to communicate is that um, you should keep on communicating, 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 to use a very different phrase from Vidya Balan, let's say.
Fine. So with this, can we wrap up the show?
Yes, of course. Why not?
Yeah. So before saying bye, I think I wanted to say, ma'am, thank you for taking time out from your busy schedule. It was a very, very interesting discussion. And my viewers, those who would like to be a corporate communications professional, you have a role model in front of you. So you can understand what ma'am did right from her college days, or rather from her childhood. I think she had a very strict childhood. She kept on reading. We didn't discuss all these parts, but
Oh, we forgot about that. But I kept on writing from the age of 6.
yes, I know. You told in one of the programs that you had a very strict childhood and you had to read a lot. Even if you didn't
No, it
understand,
wasn't
you had to read.
childhood. I did everything. I wrote and wrote from the age of 6 and won lots of prizes. But I also did Bharatnatyam. I also did piano. So it was not a strict childhood. It was a happy
It
childhood.
was a
Lots
planned.
of
It
fun.
was a planned that way. Fine. So thank you, ma'am. And we'll meet next with another interesting guest. Until then, be safe and happy, and subscribe to your own channel. Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.